All right. Hello, Holly.
Hello, Kylie. I'm so excited for this episode. If you're listening and you're like, what is happening? They're having a conversation. We are actually doing a dual episode on both of our podcast platforms.
Mhm.
And we're just going to dig into all things
Yep.
podcasting. So, Kylie,
So
for
excited.
my listeners, tell everyone who you are and what you do.
Oh, I love that. Yes, I'm so excited about this format. It feels so organic and fun and juicy and just flowy. So, if you are a podcaster who's listening and you're like, wait a minute, what is this? Agreed. Try it out with a podcast guest and see what happens. But my name is Kylie Chandler, and I am a podcast growth and strategist marketing expert. I've been in the industry for about a decade, and I ran Amy Porterfield's podcast, Online Marketing Made Easy, for about 5 years, supported Kathy Heller and some other wonderful big name podcasters, and have really just had the opportunity to grow their shows in a really big, meaningful way and use them to really become the cornerstone of their marketing and their businesses. And now I do that with my own clients and my own students. And yeah, you can join along for the ride, but it's been amazing. I'm so passionate about podcasting. So I'm excited to be here today. But Holly, go ahead and same thing. If you want to share a little bit about yourself for my audience, I would love that.
Yeah, well, I mean, what a cool background. I feel like we're going to get into some really juicy things, which I'm equally excited for. So my name is Holly Haynes. I have a podcast called Crush the Rush. It is, I would say, a pretty popular podcast. It's been around for a minute. We have had some really awesome guests like Amy Porterfield and Jenna Kutcher. And my favorite part about our podcast is we do client stories about
Mm,
how our clients have been able to build what I call life first businesses. And so I really lean into the strategy and the systems behind the scenes to help you grow and scale, mainly without relying on social media. Also, because most of my career was in corporate. And so when I started building my business, I couldn't build it on social. Like my CFO would be like, "What are you doing?" So I had to figure out some different ways and creative ways to scale. And I think now that I am a little bit older and I have older kids, it's been nice because our schedule really is, putting what we want to do first while still
mm.
having I think a pretty successful business. So I'm excited to chat more.
Yeah, I love that. So this really life first business, like what did that look like when you were starting your business? And what does that look like now for you, Holly?
Yeah. Well, you're gonna have to answer this question too. So for me, and it's interesting because I've had a couple people ask me this over the last couple weeks, and entrepreneurship was never like a in the cards for me. Like it's still like a shock to my system that this is my job because like when I was in college, entrepreneurship wasn't a degree. It wasn't a word that people talked about. Like it wasn't a thing. And so when I started my business, I knew going in, like I'm not starting this business to do the same thing that I'm doing in my corporate job. So I started very intentional of like I only want to do these things and I set very strong boundaries from the beginning. But I think what that looks like now is I actually stick to the boundaries. So I like to call them rules, although I think rules is a little strong, but we have like family rules that are values that we sort of live by. And then that's what we've built our business around. And so for me, it's like, I want to travel. We have a rule that we travel once a quarter. I usually only record podcasts on certain days. We usually don't have meetings on Fridays, and there's all these like little rules that add up so that we do have this like flexibility and white space. The rules get broken, but for the most part, we stick to them. And so it's not that different than when I started because I didn't have a lot of time when I started at the beginning. The difference is now instead of working my corporate job with the extra time I have, like I actually have free time, which is nice.
Oh, glad to hear that.
Yeah. Well, tell it. I know you have some really cool things. I know we share the love of travel, but like, what does a life first business look like for you?
Well, what's interesting, Holly, is that I just started my business officially in January. And so, prior to that, I was working for these amazing female entrepreneurs. And so I did get to see them model to an extent this life first business. And so going into becoming an entrepreneur, same thing. Like I never really thought I was going
Yeah,
to go that route. But once you have a kid, I swear it changes everything, right? Then you're like,
right?
all right. So I will admit that I have fairly strong boundaries from the get go. And I'm really grateful for that because if I hadn't, seen Amy set those boundaries or seen Kathy set those boundaries, I wouldn't even know that that's important as an entrepreneur. And so at this point, I'm very aligned with you. Like, honestly, my head down days are like Tuesday through Thursday. Not saying that I don't work Monday, Fridays, but like those are the 3 days I have options for meetings, podcast recordings. And I will say though, however, being 9 months in at this point of birthing, carrying the having the labor of my child, or my business child, is that there are some things that I'm realizing I'm building my business maybe in a way that isn't exactly aligned with what I want. But
Yeah.
for me to actually have that awareness early on is really good. And I can go, okay, we'll wrap up what I have planned based on kind of that way that maybe doesn't feel fully aligned with what I want. And then in 2026, I'm going to pivot on a few things. But I think it's important as entrepreneurs, we know that we can always pivot and we don't have to stick to one thing just because it makes
Yes.
money.
Oh, I love that so much. I mean, we could have a whole podcast
Yeah.
on that, I
Mhm.
feel like. But I mean, I feel like everyone listening is like, yes, we love podcasting. I actually want to bust a myth before we get into this. And I hear all the time, there's so many podcasts, no one's going to
Mhm.
listen to mine. What would you say to that?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Shoot. I wish I had all these numbers for you. Okay. We're gonna do something really quick. I just did actually a training for Kathy Heller. She has like a podcast starter course.
Mhm.
So I help and support her in that because the next step is kind of I'm the next step. And so in that training, I literally went through the numbers of YouTube channels that are active and then the number of blogs that are active. And it was like in the millions or billions. I don't know about
Yeah.
billions, but millions, like so many. And then active podcasts was like 400,000.
Oh, wow.
And so and on top of that, all of those aren't even active. And on top of that, 400,000 people are not competing with your topic and your
Right.
niche, right? Like we know how many true crime podcasts there are. We're not competing with those. We're not competing with the celebrity podcast. So it becomes even smaller. So when you think about a platform that isn't social media, which I want to talk more about that,
Yeah.
when you think about, okay, where's somewhere that I can show up, nurture my audience, house my content, teach, share my knowledge, my passion, all of the things. When you think about a blog or a YouTube channel or a TikTok or whatever,
Yeah.
there's so much more competition there. And really, the podcast industry and the podcast platform, it's pretty tiny compared to what you could be doing. And so that is why I say, no, it's not that big, actually. It's really not. Like, I launched my podcast in February. I've spent a ton of time in the top 30 in the marketing category in Apple
Yeah.
in that short amount of time. So it's like, when you do it right, it's actually such a powerful platform for that.
Oh my gosh, so good. Okay, you just mentioned that you have spent a lot of time in like the top 20, top 30 of the marketing category, which is huge. When did you realize that your podcast is more than just content, right? And I know that we share this because I think we use our podcast in very similar ways, but
Mhm.
you really use that as a driver for your business and I think you're seeing that in the results of the charts as well.
Oh gosh, this probably goes back to just seeing people come into Amy's digital offers or Kathy's digital offers and always saying, well, I found you through your podcast.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, my mind starts going, why do they become super fans once they find your podcast? Well, it's because they get to have you become part of their daily routine, right? It's like I'm going for a walk. I'm going to put Holly in my ear. It's what I do every Wednesday when she drops an episode. And it's like every week you're there with them. On top of that, they get to know you personally. I mean, especially now with video, if you're using video as a podcaster, not only can they hear you, they can see you. But I think there's just so many ways that a podcast can feel like they're your friend, like the podcaster is your friend. And you can just gather all these small little nuggets along the way that can really make a big impact. And so, especially when we think about entrepreneurs having a podcast, not only is it a great way to demonstrate how you teach and how you interact, but it also gives your audience a way to say, I am focusing on this one thing right now in this moment. Can I find an episode about that? Versus, and I have a course. I love courses, right? Those are great, but you have to go through all of it to really get the full picture. So what if you're thinking, you know what? I really want to enhance my podcast SEO. Well, I have an episode for you that you can listen to and implement within the same day. So I think that those are all the pieces that really started to make me go, "Oh my gosh, the podcast is it." It
Yeah.
is the way into the business. It is the cornerstone of everything we do. And when we're pouring so much time into that content, right? Like our podcast, you even said before we hopped on, you're like, my life is so full in a lot of ways. Like I
Yeah.
have twins in middle school, we have braces, we have all these things, but podcasting just feels so fun right now. And
Yeah.
we want that content to go so far beyond just pushing publish and being done with it. So, how about you? Like, what has the podcast really been for you in your business? I mean, you're kind of an old school podcaster at this
I
point.
don't know about that. Maybe. I mean, I get we have a lot of episodes, like,
Yeah,
we're gonna hit 600,
so exciting.
next year, which is crazy. Yeah, that is crazy to me. Well, I mean, to me, I picked the podcasting platform because I was working full time. I needed something that I could control. I
Mm,
needed something that I liked to do because I was doing it at really random times. So I needed to be fun or I probably wouldn't follow through. And I mean, it works as a networking tool for me as
mm,
well. So, I mean,
mm,
I started out with solo episodes, but then very quickly was like, "Oh, I wanna do more." And I mean, the guests that I meet through 600 plus episodes, I mean, I feel like that's what has grown our business, like, the
mm,
connections and the referrals and the friendships, and that is something that I never expected. Because I mean, you only talk, like, live for maybe a half hour, but then there some guests just stick around for a while, and so that's been really fun. And I think for me, and I know this is something else that we share, the podcast is like, that you talk about like the hub and spoke model. Like the
mm,
podcast is like the hub for us. Like it is like the core of all of our content, how we share things. Like I'll talk about why we did something or how we did something, or,
yeah,
bring a guest on and they can share how they did that. So it's very much like the front and center of where all of our content comes from. And then as we've grown and been able to like bring on team members, that's really like our content engine. So the
nice.
podcast like drives everything. And I always say like even if no one listened to the podcast, I would still do it because we have so much content that I don't even publish half of it. Like there's so much that you can do with like this video that we try to take advantage of as much as we can, but, like, it's just like a gold mine of content.
Oh my gosh, I love that. So, we have a mutual friend, Kate Howard.
Yeah.
Speaking of guests and relationships that kind of evolved from having a show. And her and I voice text a lot back and forth, just like, I'm thinking about doing this. Is it a good idea or not? I just need to talk to
Yeah.
somebody about it. And one thing that's been on my heart, which you so spoke to, is I think in the new year, I want to do a show or like maybe like an extension of my show that's called It Was Never About the Podcast.
Yes.
Because every female podcaster I talk to is like, it has just having the ability to network and create friendships with women who get and understand what I'm doing. It's unlike anything, right? It's to have
Yeah.
those is so important. And so I couldn't agree more. But
Yeah.
Holly, one thing that you have piqued my interest, I want to hear more
Okay.
about is building a business without social media at the forefront. Like how do we do that? Because everybody wants to be able to do that. That
Yeah.
is the dream.
So, well, it's funny because I have this program called Antisocial School, and it's
Mhm.
actually very social. And I always say, like, for me, social media is like the sidecar. It's like the second act. It's like it's there if I want it to be there, but we don't make. I don't want to say we don't make sales through social, but 95% of our sales come from email, which have come from the podcast or have come from relationships. And so honestly, it started very organic because I was working full time. I'm not a great real person. I don't wanna dance on video. Like, That's just not my personality. I'm much more of like a teacher. I like to talk. And so it kind of got me thinking of like there has to be other ways. And so for me, we use the podcast. But if you're listening and you don't have a podcast, like the model that we teach is very much like what is the center of your content and how can you be super consistent with that? You could pick the platform, right? I mean, there's so many now with like Substack and YouTube and all these different places, SEO. And then what is the system for how people come in and get to know you? And so there's really basic questions of like, well, where do your people hang out?
Mhm.
Because they might be hanging out on LinkedIn, they might be hanging out on YouTube, they might be hanging out on podcasts. So, you have to do that research and then you kind of have to build the system to nurture them in a different way. And I think the thing with social is I don't wanna say social is easy, but it is easy to get it out there quick, right? And I think some of these other systems take a minute, but the lifetime value of those systems is so much longer and so much more valuable that people get frustrated and they're like, oh, I could just post a post today in 30 seconds and somebody will like it. But like, if you could actually have a system behind the scenes that took people like from a podcast or a video or a networking event or an email and flowed through this next step, I've just found that it will pay you back 10 times more. And so that's really what we teach is like figuring out what is that system for you? How do you set it up? And then if you want to be on social, what is a content repurposing plan that makes sense?
Mm. Are you able to share, like you're talking about the system? What's an
Mhm.
example of a system?
Yeah. So, I mean, if I was reading a book, I would say a system could be anything from a routine to like an actual technical tool. But, like, as an example, our individual podcast episode that we do comes out every single Wednesday. So, I think right now it gets made into 17 different pieces of content. But we have like a system behind the scenes that does like I'm not writing 17 different pieces of content. Like we have a podcast team that like does our reel and does our video and does our show notes and does a blog. And then we create another blog actually that's like different than the podcast blog, that's longer, that is more SEO friendly. And so that gets made.
Mhm.
Then we go to Pinterest and then we go to LinkedIn. We actually have a bot now that will like spit out all this content. So it's like saving our team work. But that's like a process that we follow every single week. And then we do the same thing like with our guest episodes. Like certain content goes out on certain days, it goes to certain places. And so to me, that's a system of something that is repetitive. I know that it's getting results because I can track the metrics on it. So it's very trackable. And we have tools behind the scenes that are helping us create it. Like I'm not writing 17 pieces of content. That would be a nightmare for me, but I think it's the consistency of that is where we've been able to see our growth.
Mm. I love that.
Yeah.
I love a good system.
I know. Well, okay, so one of the things that you're known for is this podcast first funnel, which I'm obsessed with. I'm so obsessed with it. Tell me what that means. What does that look like?
Oh, I love it. Yes. Okay. So really, I'm all about funnels. And when it's funny, people come to me and they'll be like, okay, well, I want to grow my podcast. And I'm like, okay, well, actually, we're going to do a mastermind in marketing. So get ready,
Yeah.
buckle up.
Right?
And, we have to be honest, like marketing can be difficult and it takes a bit to learn and to push yourself. And you might have to learn new words, right? Like a funnel. Some people are like, wait, what is a funnel? I think most of your listeners are probably going to know, but sometimes, like knowing this marketing jargon or setting up the systems for that marketing can be difficult. So, really, what we want to think about is how can I use my podcast and repurpose the content that I've created into a free resource that is super sexy and so attractive to my audience that it's a quick yes. So, a couple ways to do this is one, I love a good podcast centric quiz, like where there's so much we can do with a quiz, right? Because not only can we cater it to our ideal customers and the nuances of kind of like one customer to the next, because of course you have kind of one overarching ideal customer, but they all have little nuances that are a little different that we can really lean into and serve. And maybe we have an offer that aligns with that, but we bring them in through the quiz, we learn a ton about them through that quiz, and then we say, oh, by the way, here's a podcast playlist that's perfect for you, because Holly, you have 600 episodes almost.
Right? I don't need to do any new episodes, right?
No, and also somebody finds you, where do they even begin?
Yeah.
Because what if they land on an episode that's great, but it's just not quite where they are? Well, they might
Yeah.
not continue to binge your show because they're like, I don't know, maybe it's not right for me. But when we can give them a curated playlist, it's like 10 home runs and now
Mhm.
they're a super fan. And then we can move them through that funnel that they've come into very specifically because we learned so much about them through a quiz. And then we can,
Mhm.
if we want, we can either nurture them or we can offer them something that's perfect for them. Another way that we can do this is actually something I like more than on when we talk about social media, putting up a reel of just like us having a conversation or promoting just one single episode on social media. We know that sometimes it performs, sometimes it doesn't. Like it's not always the best way to promote an episode, but a great way to do that instead is to create a bundle. And so we're putting together a themed bundle of, 3 to 5 podcast episodes. Again, they have a very specific topic that your audience wants to hear about, right? So it could be something around systems or being, no social growth or something like that.
Yeah.
And we bundle together these top performing 3 to 5 episodes, and we promote that on social media. And so that is going to be so much sexier than go listen to episode 349, just because it sparks the curiosity of, oh, what's in this bundle, and oh, it's specifically about that. Great, that's exactly what I want to focus on right now. I
Yeah.
mean, so I've done this in the past, and I was working with Natalie Willis of School of Bots, and
Mhm.
we promoted the bundle on social media. So I actually recommend you promote it on your website as a dynamic ad on your podcast, on social media, to your email list, all the things. But we had like a 98% conversion rate from people on social media opting into the bundle and then getting into this podcast first funnel that moved them into, being nurtured and becoming a
Yeah.
super fan. So that's kind of 2 ways that I like to use that. But really, it's just thinking about what can I create that's going to get somebody in using my top performing content, send them to the podcast, but then continue that with a nurture sequence that either just is purely nurture or leads to an offer. And often I'll say, like a low ticket offer, or if you do discovery calls, something like that as well can work
Yeah.
really well.
So good. Can we talk about podcast trends? Because I feel like, this is airing sort of at the end of the year, and a lot of
Yeah.
people are probably thinking about, 2026 or what's going on in the podcast marketing world. Like, what are some of the trends that you're seeing?
Oh, this is a good question. One thing I am seeing is creating more collaborative experiences, I guess, as
Mhm.
podcast guests or hosts together. So instead of just saying your episode went live today, actually creating content for them. Like, for instance, Holly, we would probably, this is a little different because we're doing a swap like
Yeah.
this, but I would usually say, like, here's a newsletter blurb, or I would specifically ask, how do you want to promote this? And what can I provide for you to make it really easy for
Mhm.
you? Versus just like, here's some assets and this is when it goes live. So really creating like feel good experience for your host,
Yeah.
or for your podcast guest. The other thing that I'm seeing is, again, moving more into, definitely on social media, we're seeing a shift from just the reels that have like a clip of the episode into people are playing around with carousels that have these like kind of clickbaity, conversation pieces, or people not even mentioning that it's a podcast episode that they're talking about in their reel, or that they're, and in the bottom they'll say comment whatever, and then we'll
Yeah.
send them the podcast. So that's more of a social media standpoint. When it comes to newsletters, we are definitely moving away from episode specific newsletters
Mhm.
that are like dropping into your inbox every Tuesday saying, by the way, I dropped this episode. This is what it's about. And it like goes
Yeah.
into detail. We are moving away from that. And we're moving more into these like longer form, personal, like multi point newsletters, I find that are
Mhm.
very like oh, by the way, did you see this industry update? Or, oh, here's my project plan for podcasting. Did you grab that? Oh, by the way, I dropped an episode. And I think the reason is we are so sick of AI written newsletters that it is so easy to drop your transcript in and then say, spit out a newsletter that is about this podcast episode. It takes more from us as a podcaster to actually sit down and decide. I mean, I'm not saying that we're not using AI to craft these, but to actually think of the different pieces of that newsletter. I personally, I'll sit down and I'll figure that out. And it's kind of like, that's my baby for the week. I'm so proud of my newsletter because it gives me a way to have that extra touch point with my subscribers every week. And it just feels really like juicy, and it doesn't feel so like, okay, just, AI spit this out. She didn't even look at it. And so I
Yeah.
think we're starting to crave that a little bit more, especially when we're giving people our email. Also, I think we're leaning more into SEO as podcasters, right? We know that Apple and Spotify are their own search platforms. So, AI is pulling podcast episodes, they're pulling reels, all of the things. And so we're all starting to be more intentional about what words and what topics we're using. And the episode titles aren't cutesy anymore. They shouldn't be, right? They
Right.
should be so clear, and we should be using keywords that we want to rank for. And so I think that those are some of the things. What about you? Do you
Yeah.
feel like there's any coming down the pipeline?
You mentioned the newsletter, and one of the things that we teach sort of in our antisocial method is obviously email and funnels. And I feel like that's where you and I could just like geek out for hours. So, yeah, hopefully, this won't be a 3-hour podcast. But we have played around with our email format quite a bit. One of the things we did stop doing was the individual episodes, which we did for a while. I think everyone
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
And I sort of just noticed that, like, it wasn't really doing anything, which I think goes back to, like, look at your statistics, like, what is working?
Mhm.
Don't stop
Yeah.
doing if it's working. But definitely went into more of, like, I don't wanna say teaching, but it's like a personal story or like, "Hey," like
Mhm.
you said, "Hey, did you try this today?" Or, "Here's, like, one quick thing you can do today if you wanna learn more." We did a whole episode on it. Like, we redid our, antisocial school course, and I did a podcast on why we redid it, even though it was working, and then we sent an email out that said, like, "Hey, these are some things that you should look at
Mm.
if you wanna learn more. Sort of listen to the episode." So that's worked really well. We do I think it's like a known term now, but I call them hand raiser emails, and they're very much like a shorty email is also what I've heard them called. Sometimes I call them
Mm.
that,
Mhm.
where it's like, let's pretend a podcast episode comes out. Instead of like linking the link, you ask a question like, hey, if you're looking to start a podcast and you want to know what trends are working for 2026, reply trends and we'll send you the episode plus some like, I don't know, whatever you want to say. And so it's more of like, it's kind of a fun way to start conversations. It's
Mhm.
almost like the word in the DMs, but you're doing it through email,
Right.
and it helps us see, like, who's interested. And sometimes we actually get more replies from that than we do clicks, and so I think it's just like,
Wow.
if you're on your phone, you're used to social where you reply with a word, and so, I don't know, it's been fun to play around with just to see what people are interested in, and then you actually get to have a conversation. So it is, like,
Yeah.
systematized, but then, like, the conversation piece is not.
That's what I wanted to ask is, are you manually responding with like you have the canned email written out, but or how does
Yeah,
that
so
work?
the email goes out to everyone, but their responses are personal. Yeah,
Oh,
so the
cool. Okay.
responses are, like, one to one, which takes a minute, but if you do it every once in a while, like, it's a
Mhm.
great way to just,
Yeah.
like, get a understanding of where your audience is at, like, what
Yeah.
questions they have, what objections they have, and so those are some things that we've seen. I think in terms of podcast trends, like, our best episodes are always, the ones like this that are, like, super real, super raw, like, not the 10 tips you can Google. Those are always the ones that perform the best. And I think, for us, our podcast drives sales. So our podcasts are very much focused on relationship building.
Mm.
And so I always say, if anyone is thinking about starting a podcast, like really think about like what your goal is because that makes such a big difference.
I love that. Which reminded me of one more thing.
Yeah.
I think for so long it was like, how do I monetize? How do I monetize? How do I monetize? And how do I get sponsors and affiliates for my podcast and all of that,
Yeah.
which can be great. And I also feel like with the more and more information coming out about downloads, just not giving anybody the data that they actually, need to understand. I think we're also seeing, which I'm super excited about, moving into monetizing your podcast with your own offers. And that's what I'm all about. When people come to me and they're like, I want to monetize, I'm like, great. I'm not necessarily going to go out and help you get a bunch of brands, but I will help you sell your products and your offers on your show. And so I think we're seeing that. And it also feels really good because people know, like, and trust you because they listen to you. So when you say, for instance, I have a brand new digital offer called the Podcast Growth Toolkit, and you bet I'm going to be promoting and driving
Yeah.
people to that on the podcast because it is like my gift. It is my gift. I've worked so hard. I know it's going to support them in such a big way. And I would much rather put that on my podcast at this point than
Yeah.
bring maybe an affiliate that isn't totally aligned, but is paying me. So I better do it anyways, kind of thing.
Yeah. 100%. Okay. If you were launching a show, what's one thing that you wouldn't do?
Okay. So this is funny. I don't launch shows, but I
Well, if you were
literally,
launching, like, a new podcast, if you have a client that were launching, like, a new podcast, which one thing you would
yeah,
tell them, like, not to do?
I know. I know. It's well, I was going to say 2 weeks or last week, we just launched, I did help a friend launch a podcast. So what would I tell them not to do? I would tell them, don't fly by the seat of your pants. Do not try and edit your show. Like, have some sort of a system. If you can budget out a little bit to have somebody edit it, you're probably going to be able to go further longer because it can get very exhausting to record and then edit and then create all the pieces. So if
Yes.
you can get a little bit of support, don't try to edit them yourself. That's what I would say.
I would say that too. I feel like editing was the first thing that I outsourced
Me
'cause
too.
I was like, "It's too much time. It's just too much time." And I'm too much of a
Yeah,
perfectionist, and I know it doesn't have to be perfect, but it's not my cup of tea. It's just not.
same, same. What about you?
What would I not if I was launching a show, what would I not do? I think for me, and we shared this before we started recording, I do really well with scheduling guests. But when
Mhm.
it comes to recording my own individual episodes, I usually get behind because I'm like, "Oh, I'll do it later," or, "Oh, I'll do it another time." And so I've tried really hard this year to at least batch them like 3 or 4 at a time. I mean, batching is like the simplest trick in the book,
Yes.
but it really does work. And I notice that the episodes flow better because there's like a journey that we're
Mhm.
taking, the listeners on.
Yeah.
And I'm in it, right? Like, I'm not switching between, like, client calls or writing content or taking kids
Mine.
to dance class. Like, I'm in it for, like, 2 or 3 hours, and then I'm done. And so, I would make sure that you have, like, at least a few episodes ready to go. But they typically do better too when I do it that way, as instead of doing it random.
And to add to that, when you, especially if you're a female entrepreneur who does have promotions within your business, it is such a good way to look at your calendar and say, how are my podcast episodes being the bridge, the content bridge to get my ideal customer from where they are to where they need to be to say yes to my offer. And we
Mhm.
use the podcast in that way. And so
Yeah.
when you're just flying by the seat of your pants and like, oh, I have an episode coming out tomorrow, even though I'm about to launch, and you have no like alignment, that's where your podcast doesn't start to work for your business. So we really want
Yeah.
to be thinking about what promos do I have and what content is going to support that promotion.
Yeah, I love that.
Mm.
Just for fun, what's a business tool that you are loving?
Oh, love I'm really loving Captivate for hosting for a podcast platform right now, hosting
Okay.
platform. I have had ideas about getting together with a bunch of women and creating like a women-led hosting platform, so stay tuned, I guess.
Yeah.
But I like Captivate. I think it's been really fun to play around in there. It's really user-friendly for podcasters. Yeah. How about you?
The tool that I'm living and dying by right now is actually ClickUp. It's like not a
Yeah.
podcasting tool, but
Oh,
it
that's so
is
cool.
actually. So we built our like podcast calendar in ClickUp. And so we have it all scheduled of like, when guests apply, it comes through ClickUp and I see it come through. When you are on the show, you fill out a form that goes in ClickUp. It has all the information. So our team can access it. I can access it. It really just tells me exactly what I need to focus on. But
Mm,
you mentioned, having a calendar. I can look at the ClickUp calendar and I could see like what episodes we have planned and what's coming, and then I can adjust it based on like what offers and products and services we're
Bonuses.
selling. So I'll actually plan our episodes in the calendar in ClickUp based on like what offers are coming. And so it's just a really easy way to stay organized.
I love that. Okay, I have one more question, then I want us to share how people can find out more about
Yeah.
us. But
Yeah.
all right, like being a mom, if you've listened to my podcast, being a mom as an entrepreneur, like that's such a big part of my
Yeah.
personality and what's important. And we both are girl moms. And
Yes.
so like what has been the most important piece for you building your business as an entrepreneur and a mama?
Oh gosh. I mean, when I started my podcast, which is the first thing we did in our business, my girls are in kindergarten, so they're twins, and it was COVID. So it was kind of a
Whoa.
nightmare a little bit. I was also working full time. And I mean, I get like teary eyed thinking about it because I mean, I can picture them like sitting on my floor being like, "Okay, I'm gonna record this episode, like, please don't make a noise," but there was, like, nowhere for them to go, like, it is what it is, and so I think it's been really cool to see, like, the family grow with our business because, like, we have retreats and things at our house now, and they're very into that. They used to call the podcast the Popcast, so they're, like, super into, like, "Oh, are you recording today?" Or, like, "Who's on your show?" And then we've had like, one of my clients was on the Today Show a couple weeks ago, and they, like, know my clients, and it's just really cool to see that them be a part of it. We've also done podcast recording, like, we did a retreat, and we did podcast recording in our kitchen. This was, like, a very creative. I had, like, a bunch of my entrepreneur friends from Columbus come over, and then I had my clients, and we set it up in our kitchen, and we did, like, a live Q&A that aired on the podcast, but, like, my husband's there, my kids are there, my
Mm,
clients are there, my friends are there, and it's just been I mean, it's such, like, a family-driven community, so I think to me, that's been the coolest part because it's not separate, like, it's very much integrated, and I feel like that was what I really wanted when I left corporate.
mm.
What about you?
Oh, I just love what you said. And like my daughter's too young to like really
Yeah.
understand, the whole what's going on. But really, I do feel like everything I do is just to get us to the point where we can have all the flexibility in the world. And if she's sick, I can take care of her that day or just like having that flexibility, being my own boss and also doing something that feels like I'm building my dream. I always felt like I was building somebody else's dream and
Mhm.
it just feels so good to be able to do this. And I do love being able to connect with other mom entrepreneurs and just like, we're in this together. And I'm so proud of all of us for showing our kiddos what's possible and how we can
Yeah.
have passion and still be a mama. So
Yeah. So
it's
good.
beautiful.
If you
Yeah.
wanna start a podcast or learn more about podcasting, I mean, Kylie is the go-to person. So share us where everyone can learn from you and connect with you.
Oh, thank you, Holly. This has been so fun. I just adore you. So I have a podcast of my own. If you're on Holly, if you're listening on Holly's platform, it's called Podcast Growth Tools, and so you can go check that out. Like I said, I started it this year, so I'm just almost at 40 episodes, but lots of juicy details in there, lots of great guests like Holly. Go check that out, and then I also just launched a brand new digital product, which is like so accessible and so great. It's called the Podcast Growth Toolkit, and really, I just consolidated like the four things that you need to work on over the next 30 days to really see growth quickly for your existing podcast. So you can go and grab that at podcastmarketinghub.com/Holly. And it's been such a journey. But Holly, thank you for today. This was such a treat.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so, so amazing.
And then for my audience, Holly, I would love for you to share where they can go and hang out with you.
Yeah. Well, for my audience, you guys hear me talk about anti-social school all the time. And if you're in our program, how Kylie just introduced and shared where to find her I mean, that's what we teach. Like give people like one place to go, tell them exactly what to do, tell them what to get. So that's just like a little side note. But I do have a podcast called Crush the Rush. You could just go to hollymariehaynes.com to find that. And then I also have a workshop and it does talk about podcasting, but it also talks about if you have a podcast or you have other platforms that you're wanting to share what you do without using social media, we walk you through the three different ways that you can grow and scale without having to be on your phone all the time, which is something I know Kylie and I are both passionate about. And you can just go to hollymariehaynes.com/workshop. There's a private podcast attached. We really do love podcasting around here. And yeah, hopefully you can get yourself way more visible without having to scroll all day.
I love that, Holly. It's so important. Well, this was such a blast. I
So
loved
fun.
this.
So fun. Yes.
Thank you, Holly. And I know we'll have probably more down the road that we get to collaborate and do
I
together.
know.
So
I
thank you.
can't wait. Thank you so much.